I'm Greg Guma, and this is the People's Republic. Platitudes. Can't live without them, but can't really trust them. Take the one that goes, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but not to their own facts. What's the problem with that? Well, it's vague, confusing, and not really true. No one is entitled to either facts or opinions. They aren't possessions or some bonus you can earn. Sharing experiences with others, we routinely select the facts that back up or even dramatize our story or position and leave out the rest. We edit our perceptions and we make deletions. In other words, we do feel entitled to assemble our own facts. In an argument, the winner is usually the one whose facts seem more important, convincing, or entertaining. Instead, we could say something like this: there are many facts, but also many truths. Or we could say, fiction can save, but reality kills. That's complicated, but basically it's about getting to a greater truth. Or we could say, all facts aren't equal. Same goes for opinions. Fair enough. But it's not okay to mess with them, weaponize them. That's disinformation, the handgun of hybrid war. Anyway, here are some of all three: facts, opinions, and truths, mainly on the topics of Putin's playbook, what really happened in Crimea and Ukraine, and questioning our assumptions. Mind games.
'72 WNIX, 110% American. Are you?
Good morning. This is your announcer, Henry Fonda, with WNIX on the air. And now here he is, the man who is still your president, believe it or not.
Hail to the chief, Dick Nixon.
Good morning, my fellow Americans, and welcome to the Dick Nixon Show, starring me, the wit from Whittier. Hello, I'm Richard Milhouse.
The past isn't dead. That's what Faulkner said. It isn't even past. So is Trump actually America's blustering Mussolini playing junior partner to Putin's cunning, pugged-up Hitler imitation? That's definitely just an opinion, but people are saying the Russian phenom is a method actor, always dredging up deep resentments to keep it unreal. Trump, on the other hand, as we all know, is a natural, pure impulse. Talk about an odd couple. I don't know if any of this is true, but as an opinion it sounds about right. And these days that's enough. So let's talk about an upcoming Showtime series. It's basically a fascist buddy comedy about two billionaire mass murderers, Vlad and Donnie, on reality TV. It's part House of Cards, part Sopranos, based loosely on a true story. Great locations, endless opportunities for violence, black comedy, and betrayal. Scorsese did the pilot. Did you miss season 1? It was radical. They carve up Ukraine and Syria. What damage will they do in season 2? A hint? It's called Killing NATO. Vlad and Donnie. Two killers. One world. No exit. Too dark? Let's reset. Seriously, I am reaching the conclusion that Trump consciously models his behavior on Putin's playbook. Yes, conscious and Trump in the same sentence. I'll bet they even talk shop. How to destabilize your opponents, silence critics, demonstrate power, look like a boss. No wonder they don't want to have anyone looking at those transcripts. But if you could get those transcripts, what would we hear? Maybe something like this. You know, I love the way you stand. The chin high, very manly. Yeah, that's right. It's called strength. All the greats have a walk, but the haters, the losers, human scum. Let me just say, I love how you handle them. Big bang gone. But what can I do with this place? They're coming at me from everywhere. Don't worry, darling. We're handling it. Just joking. We won't intervene. But seriously, we do have some great new narratives ready for the next fall. My trolls are very modern, state-of-the-art, strong. Perfect. You know, I don't like to quote other people, but someone once said, if it's what you say, I love it. I think it was Don Jr. Yes, I saw that. I see everything. No, just kidding. Too far? Too bad? How about this? Currently, Trump can't get away with jailing and murdering his critics, but don't you sense that he would if he could? He'd create the kind of soft fascism that he sees emerging around the world in other places. He describes elements of it often. And he may actually be able to get the Supreme Court to radically expand the powers of the president. Now, I wouldn't blame all of that on Putin, but it is useful to understand what has actually happened in Russia, especially since it may point to some of what may still happen here, even if Trump is impeached and Elizabeth Warren is president. You know, Barry Goldwater actually saw it coming. In Conscience of a Conservative, he predicted that over the long haul, the U.S. and the USSR would become more like each other, even maybe past one another on the political spectrum. Well, he was at least half right. War of the Worlds. Not long after the end of the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Putin annexed Crimea, a Russian-speaking region in Ukraine. It was a textbook case of hybrid warfare, but not widely understood as such at the time. In fact, it was a test run for what was executed against the U.S. 2 years later. The terrain was seeded with a persistent propaganda and a social media-fueled disinformation campaign, followed by a quiet invasion with unmarked and identified troops. Their existence was denied at first. However, you know the old don't believe your own eyes trick, while those mysterious forces took over the means of communication. Even in this siloed world, these are now accepted facts. Yet not everyone does see it that way, and I'll come back to that, other people's facts. But back to Crimea and Ukraine. There had been demonstrations in Kyiv since 2013, culminating in the flight of President Yanukovych. That was not long before the Crimea incursion began. Pro-EU protests really bothered President Putin, who claimed that the U.S. was behind them and other so-called color revolutions. And throughout this period, RT and other Russian outlets echoed his accusations that more protesters were Nazis or even fascists. This type of disinformation was persistent and apparently effective. On February 27, 2014, troops in unmarked uniforms took over Crimea's parliament, along with key locations like the airports, military bases, and TV stations. Little green men. Actually, they were Russian Special Operations Forces. Of course, Putin denied it, and again, predictably, outlets like RT parroted the line. Along with them came a group of internet trolls and bots to echo the official line. A week later, Putin was still denying that Russian troops were involved. But as I said, not everyone sees it this way. Here's a quote. The U.S. and NATO were licking their chops, wishing to grab Crimea and its Black Sea Russian naval base after the coup. So writes Bruce Gagnon, who recently visited Crimea on a Russian study tour. But they were thwarted by the people of Crimea, he writes. Licking their chops. It's a provocative phrase. Another one that's also provocative is that the people of the area wanted to be reunited with the mother country. Charged, disputable, but not in doubt. The pro-Russia government in Crimea that was installed promptly declared the Republic of Crimea independent. Fishy a little bit, but okay. And then a referendum was called for March 15th, just 2 weeks after the invasion, and the choice whether or not to join the Russian Federation. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor. But something to keep in mind about Crimea. 65% of its population is ethnically Russian, but in Ukraine generally, only 17% are Russian. A few weeks later, Putin finally admitted that Russian soldiers were involved. The UN rejected the annexation and the referendum and passed a resolution defending the territorial integrity of the Ukraine. Russia was also suspended from the G8, and a planned summit in Sochi was cancelled. Putin was slightly embarrassed. But in Russia, the annexation was very popular. Most Russians see Crimea and Ukraine as part of their nation. Annexation made them proud. It suggested a potential return to great nation status. But taking over Ukraine through invasion wasn't possible, at least in the same way. It's too big, too diverse, too European. So the fallback has become making it dysfunctional, gradually persuading people that turning back east is the preferable outcome. This is known in Russian intelligence as a frozen conflict strategy. The idea is to make Ukraine more vulnerable and, if necessary, ungovernable, a failed state. Nevertheless, local email lists circulating on the left in my own community continue to feature claims that Russia's TV operation is more truthful than U.S. media. Asked what they think of the evidence emerging in the Trump impeachment hearings, many of these same activists also say they aren't paying attention. But they continue to argue that Russia is being scapegoated, that Ukraine may still be infested with fascists, and it's really part of Russia anyway. Stop picking on Putin, they charge. He's no worse than the U.S. establishment. In the old days, progressives would call this kind of response collaboration. Today, it is one of the reasons that despite the ascendance of national progressives like Bernie Sanders, the left remains largely irrelevant. You know, one TV analyst called Putin's regime gangster capitalism, and I don't think it's Russia-phobic to make that critique. You could argue even that the development of that gangster capitalism was a result of Western neglect and even humiliation, a fateful missed opportunity. But a sympathetic motive, plus some paranoia, doesn't excuse the crimes of Putin and friends. It's no surprise he's popular at home. The simple comeback to that is, well, so was Hitler. Of course, he's not Hitler, but like Trump, he has used racial and ethnic prejudice and homophobia and Christian fundamentalism to hold on to power. On the other hand, the claim that Democrats want to restart the Cold War is also false, a way of changing the subject. The main threat to freedom worldwide right now is the authoritarian surge, and it is advancing largely through the use of disinformation, manipulation of mass consciousness. This puts people in the position of defending highly flawed institutions and flawed people because they represent the guardrails and moderating influences, and that's uncomfortable. But when you face the barbarians, the cops look better. This cuts through traditional ideological lines, creates moral quandaries, and challenges deeply held beliefs. Well, that's it. The People's Republic podcast is taking a break. It's been a great first season, and we'll be back. Check out the archives. Until then, I'm Greg Guma with the People's Republic.